Hello there my Gummy Knights and welcome back to the Echo Chamber. Now getting back into what if Goku achieved the Ikari form. Now we'll be kicking off with a quick recap before getting into the next part of the story. When we last left off, due to the danger that his son had been put into, Goku achieved a crucial evolution that will ultimately reshape the Dragon Ball world as we know it. Him having achieved the fatal Ikari state, a specialized transformation that allows you to use the full power of the Azaru, but just in your humanoid form. With the unlocking of this power being the vital element that Goku needed in order to put down Raditz. Although he was not able to completely finish the job, the fatal blow had been dealt. However, Raditz did inform the rest of the group via through Piccolo that 2 more Saiyans would be coming, and thus the group decided to prepare for the oncoming battle, as they trained like never before for the fight of their lives. Alright, so as we're getting into the next part, there was a few things I want to clarify and expound upon from the initial part, mainly revolving around the training aspect in relation to everyone getting stronger in order to combat the Saiyans. I want to specifically focus on something that I wanted to expound upon in relation to both Goku and King Kai's relationship into this, because I basically kind of said that once King Kai essentially parted the story onto Goku in relation to his Saiyan heritage and his people, that there was something that Goku was going to be able to learn from that in order to be able to ultimately get stronger, so that way he can be able to control this power and actually use the power. Now, I did want to go ahead and say that it wasn't just that he gave him that story. It was essentially him also explaining that the nature of the Saiyans and how that can acclimate to Goku's power and helping him control it. And like I said in the original part, the initial thing and reason why I ultimately had Goku pretty much go up there to train with King Kai along with Piccolo, but more so Goku in regards to this case, was the fact that King Kai essentially had a power-up very similar to what Goku did in the Kaioken. And thus I said that Goku essentially learning the Kaioken without activating it and using the Ikari form instead was the best way that he can utilize that power, as it would still be the same type of teaching method, given that it is ultimately a power boost, just with significantly less drawbacks than something like the Kaioken, which is another reason as to why Goku would want to use it over the Kaioken itself. But basically I just kind of like wanted to expound upon that a little bit. And also kind of like where Goku's power level actually was when he was first traveling onto Snake Way. So essentially, as you can see on screen right now, Goku's power level had already upgraded to around 924, which is actually around the same level as his Super Kamehameha Wave, which I think would actually make the most sense in regards to the relation of the Zenkai boost that he would have received, as well as the Ikari boost, and then on top of that receiving a Zenkai from the Ikari as well, as we do know that transformations and stuff like that do ultimately damage the body, especially in regards to a Saiyan, can also help increase their peaks and things of that nature, especially when it comes to them learning how to control it and through training mastering that transformation. So I think that Goku, when he essentially got better or he got healed, would have been around this level. I think that that's a comfortable level to put him with, and so as he's traveling on Snake Way, I think that that's probably was going to be his baseline level, traveling over to Snake Way to go to King Kai's as he's starting, which is why I said in the last part that a lot of the things that he kind of suffered from originally in canon, he would not be suffering from here in regards to getting used to the planet's gravity and things of that nature, and having a much easier time going through the cycle of training. I'm not saying it's going to be entirely non-difficult, but it'll just be significantly less difficult than it was in canon, as we can assume that he did get a power increase, but it was probably very negligible, as I don't think that Akira was really focusing on things like Zenkais up until later points within the story. And some people can argue that they probably didn't even really exist yet. I think that they necessarily did. I mean, it was kind of talked about as to why Goku as a kid was always getting stronger. It just may not have been mentioned to be a Zenkai boost, but that's essentially what it was. Either way, I think that here would have been significantly more so something that you can express that with. And I think that here versus in canon, where it would have been, like I said, pretty negligible in terms of the boost, I think here's actually a much greater boost than ever could have possibly have been during canon. So I think that here, that would be a comfortable level to where I would put him at. I wanted to go ahead and just express and expound upon those elements of the story so that way you guys get a better understanding. That it wasn't just, once again, King Kai kind of like telling Goku about his story, but kind of like using that history to help motivate him and ultimately help Goku, more so embrace that part of his Saiyan nature and use the power more effectively, as well as Goku having a higher baseline level than what he did originally in canon. But getting back into the story more properly, I actually want to go ahead and take it over to Vegeta and Nappa real quick. That way I can show you guys how a change in story would ultimately influence them. As upon hearing what Raditz says, Vegeta most of all was taken aback. He couldn't actually believe that anyone had unlocked the quote-unquote legendary Super Saiyan form, that it was utterly ridiculous and preposterous. But he could not deny the ultimate fact, that the Scouter reading did show that Goku's power level was quote-unquote rising and rising, ultimately reaching a power level that soared way from what Raditz was initially reading off of. And so it could have been possible. He could have indeed been a legendary Super Saiyan. Despite Vegeta's pride, he knew that he would ultimately have to accept this and plan accordingly. So instead of quote-unquote just being angry and trying to rush immediately to Earth, Vegeta actually decides to hold himself back, humbling himself a little bit, and decides to tell Nappa that they're going to actually prepare. They do not want to go to Earth and ultimately get stopped by this quote-unquote legendary Super Saiyan before they had a chance to make their wish and achieve it. Given the fact that Vegeta's ultimate goal was to be able to defeat Frieza, and this could be a snag in the plan that, if not addressed properly, can ultimately spell his downfall. So basically what he tells Nappa is that they're actually going to train a little bit. Now, it's not going to be as long as the actual time skip, because I'm still going to have them roughly show up around the same time that they did originally. It's just going to be off by only a month. A month of training that Vegeta and Nappa are both going to do. And don't get me wrong, I will have them gain an exponential increase, but it won't be as significant as something like the Z Fighters or even Goku and Piccolo will be receiving, as they won't be training as intensely. As even though Vegeta is worried about Goku being a legendary Super Saiyan, once again, the power level that was being read off just went over 4,000. Now, Vegeta is smart, and so he understands that it wasn't necessarily the full power per se. However, Vegeta knows that he's much stronger now, but the way that Vegeta looks at it is that he ultimately wants to be prepared. And given the fact that Nappa is actually weaker, at least judging by the reading that they were able to get. And so, like I said, Vegeta would rather address the situation properly and not run into any snags in his plan, because ultimately, once again, he just wants to go ahead and defeat Frieza, but he knows he's going to need his wish in order to be able to do that. So him and Nappa decide to train. But right as Vegeta is explaining to Nappa exactly what they're going to be doing for their training, they end up being called into a meeting by none other than Frieza himself. Now, of course, this actually makes sense, as Frieza originally within canon was actually monitoring the situation as well, which is what ultimately led him going to Namek in order to seek out the Dragon Balls on his own. However, something that would be different about this timeline would be the fact that he heard on the line a Super Saiyan. This is what was reported to him, that somebody said that some Saiyan on Earth had become a Super Saiyan, which is ultimately why Frieza ended up calling the meeting. As first and foremost, he was ultimately dumbfounded by the idea that there were still other Saiyans that he didn't know about that existed on any other planet that wasn't already under his control, especially on the planet so far into the outskirts like Earth. But now to hear the idea that this so-called Saiyan who lives on this backwaters planet might be the fabled Super Saiyan, he must get some answers on this. And so in regards to the conversation that he ultimately ends up having with both Vegeta and Nappa, is just expressing the idea as to what they may know about certain information in regards to this Saiyan or any other Saiyans. Vegeta as stoic as ever and trying to play it as smart as possible without raising Frieza's suspicions, especially given to the fact that with the whole Dragon Ball situation, if Frieza did decide to ultimately go to Earth himself, this could spell doom for Vegeta altogether. And so his basic goal was trying to alleviate any of Frieza's fears and doubts. And so essentially he goes out of his way to try to convince Frieza to disregard Raditz's statements altogether. Basically explain to him the nature of the class system in regards to the Saiyan warriors of Planet Vegeta. Expressing the idea towards Frieza that it was virtually impossible for somebody of low birth to even have the necessary power to become an elite Saiyan, let alone a quote-unquote Super Saiyan. Essentially saying that Raditz must have just been talking out of his mind and just trying to play up the fact that he met an incredibly strong Saiyan. However, Vegeta points out that the Saiyan will be absolutely no threat to himself, and especially not a threat to Frieza, and pointing out that he himself will be willing to take full responsibility for this incident and go and handle the matter himself. Frieza gives a malicious smile and begins to chuckle to himself, basically hand-waving the situation away as a matter among monkeys, telling Vegeta that he was essentially free to do whatever he wants, but just to make sure that he got the job done. Whether he captured the Saiyan and brought him into the fold, or killed him, made no difference to Frieza. Vegeta bows and thanks him, still maintaining his neutral expression, although while in his head he is absolutely seething. Basically, he's wondering as to whether or not this was the only thing that Frieza wanted to talk to him about. His suspicions were answered when Frieza was asking if there was anything else that Vegeta would like to report in regards to what happened, because other than the whole Super Saiyan thing, there was something else that he might have heard in relation to why Raditz was actually on the planet, with Vegeta ultimately saying no, that there was nothing else, that the express reason as to why Raditz went there was to try and recruit his brother, but it seems that ultimately ended up failing. Frieza seemingly showed an expression of delight at this news, and finally dismissed Vegeta, once again telling him to get the job done quickly, asking as to when he would be heading out for this mission, with Vegeta saying that it should take no more than him and Nappa a few days to gather up the supplies necessary before they head for the planet. Frieza chuckles to himself again as he wishes Vegeta luck. And once alone after Vegeta leaves, Frieza looks towards Zarbon and Doria, telling them to go and immediately start making preparations, as they too would be leaving soon in order to head over to planet Namek. This is due to the fact that although he somewhat bought the information in regards to the whole Super Saiyan debacle, he did not want to dismiss everything Raditz said, alluding to the idea of the Dragon Balls, because although the Scouter was ultimately damaged by the uprising Goku's power, it was still somewhat functional, so that way you can hear. And what Frieza heard on the other end in regards to the Dragon Balls during the conversation with Piccolo that Raditz had, Frieza wasn't about to miss the opportunity to check out that information for himself, basically saying that it wouldn't matter even if there was a quote-unquote Super Saiyan that laid on Earth, as once Frieza got his wish of immortality, he would be the ultimate most powerful being in the universe, and would be more than enough to handle any foe that came his way. Back with Nappa and Vegeta, Nappa does inquire as to but Vegeta just dismisses him, telling him that they need to work quickly and immediately go off to go and do their training. But he does tell him that they would have to be doing this in secret, as most likely Frieza would be ultimately watching him, and they both are ultimately successful in this goal. Training in secret for a month, they ultimately get an exponential increase in strength. Satisfied with this level up, Vegeta tells Nappa that now was the time for them to head towards Earth. And of course, just like in canon, they would be there within the following year. Alright, hey guys, before we continue forward with this part, I did want to cut in here real quick because I know that I may have not mentioned it beforehand, but I did kind of mention it just within this part. I want to go ahead and correct the record on something because I know some people are going to call me out for it, but I am kind of like retconning one of the pieces of information that was pointed out within the first part in relation to the scouter that Raditz had, because I think originally I basically said that it exploded, and even in this part right here I do believe that I said that it exploded, so that was my bad. I wanted to say that Goku damaged it. He didn't explode it with his power, but he did ultimately damage it, which did destroy most of its functionality, but not in its entirety. So the message in regards to the Dragon Balls was still able to be heard, and then in relation to hearing about the Super Saiyan and all that was able to be heard as well. So the scouter once again was damaged, but it just wasn't exploded. Because I kind of like realized while going into this part of the script that I had kind of like had that down there to where it was oopsie doopsie. I said it had exploded when I meant to say it had been damaged. So this is kind of like a retcon to part one, as well as a retcon for this part as well. So I hope you guys aren't too mad. That was like a mistake on my end. I meant to say damaged, so that way we go ahead and get this information out. But other than that, we can go ahead and move forward with this part. And so the year has now gone and passed, and just like in canon, the Saiyans ultimately arrive, and pretty much things do go normally from there. And there will be, of course, some key differences that we're going to get into, but right now what I want to get into is, of course, everyone's favorite thing, power levels. So we're going to be starting off with the Earthlings and then going up into the Saiyans. I held off pointing out the Saiyans' new power level until now because I wanted to get everyone's basically out there right away, all as one big group that we can kind of go ahead and do. So we'll start off with, of course, the Z Fighters, and then we're going to go ahead and head over into the Saiyans power level. Now, starting off with our weakest Z Fighter, that is going to be Chaozu, who basically, got strong, but, no real stronger than, like canon counterparts. Not like a huge significant margin, because I did say this like in the first part, but in regards to like the Z Fighters, barring, of course, Piccolo and Goku, everyone, although I did say that they would quote unquote be training just as intently and they would be pushed a little bit harder, I don't think it would necessarily yield that much of a significant growth here, because it's not like that, you know, they would be training necessarily any harder than what they were originally. I mean, even with this knowledge of like Goku and Piccolo going to go train with King Kai, I think that Kami would push them harder, but ultimately they would see a significant increase as they do here, but it's not going to be like astronomical, right? As though they, you know, had boosters with them, or as though they spend time in the highball time chamber and what have you. But anyway, Chaozu, you know, is at a power level of 1500, so pretty much he's as strong as Raditz. Next is rounding up is to Yajirobe, who's at 1700. It's a little bit over 1700, but that's the general gist. Going on, we have next is Yamcha, who is at 2800. Again, a little bit over, but that's the general gist of the power that he currently has. And then we're going up through Krillin, who has a power level 3000. Now he has the most significant because originally in canon, he wasn't, you know, that much higher than Raditz. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that he has the most significant, but you know, he wasn't, you know, that much stronger than Raditz originally when the time skip finished up. But now here, he has a power level of around 3000. So yeah, definitely a lot stronger. Like I said, Kami would have pushed them harder, but you know, not necessarily to a point to where it'd be too extreme. Then finishing us up with the mainline Earthlings, as in like the human fighters, you do have Tien, excuse me, you do have Tien at a power level of 3500, and then of course you have Piccolo, who's going to be at a power level over 10,000, and then you have Goku finishing us off here for the Z fighters with a power level over 23,000. And moving right along to the Saiyans, Nappa's new power level after the 1 month training is going to be a dead even 10,000, and Vegeta's new power level after training is going to be a dead even 27,000. Basically, like I said, they would do a month of training, but that's only to be, you know, prepared, because they wanted some of that preparation and they wanted to go ahead and get stronger, just in case that this whole Super Saiyan thing turned out to be a bigger deal than what it actually was. But you know, they just wanted to be prepared for that. And as you know, was pointed out in the story, Nappa was ultimately weaker than what the power level was showcasing for Goku when Raditz Scouter got damaged, and basically they lost communication touch with the reading, and that was basically like the last thing that they got in regards to the power level. But yeah, other than that, this is what the new power levels are for everyone. Not too bad, but you can definitely see where there's a disparity within the power levels. But like I said, for the most part, this is pretty much good as to where they can be, and mainly regards to around Nappa and Vegeta's training. It was specifically kind of like to deal with the Super Saiyan, but they weren't training all too intently, because once again, Vegeta had essentially read out that he was already stronger than whatever power Goku showed, but they just wanted extra preparation, which again is why they are not astronomically higher, right? Because if I was giving them the boost that the Earthlings got, because for instance, I like to bring this up a lot, but in canon, I made it higher here, but in canon, Goku still got a 19 times increase. Now here, 25, and he's still not as strong as Vegeta with training. Okay, so, but still in canon, it was like a 19 times increase, and this pretty much went almost across the board. It wasn't as high as that for everyone, but essentially across the board, the Earthlings got dramatically stronger, but we do know that that is because of the intensity of training. We do know that Akira essentially pointed out that the harder you train for something, the more exponential your boost will be for it. So Vegeta and Nappa weren't training as seriously because their main goal was trying to make sure they were prepared for the Super Saiyan or a potential Super Saiyan. Anyway, with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and go into exactly, you know, what's going to happen going forward in relation to the story. Now, like I said, pretty much certain things do go the same way as they do in canon. Goku and Piccolo are not here yet, but this is only due to the fact that because we had a little bit of overlap in regards to the time frame, they don't know that the Saiyans are here yet, and so they're still essentially on King Kai's planet during the last bit of training, because the idea was that they were supposed to come within a year. And so they now arrive, but they're just a little bit later than that. And so that's why Goku and Piccolo aren't here. But the other Z fighters do sense the two Saiyans and essentially show up to go ahead and do their thing. And just like in canon, Nappa goes ahead and releases Cybermen, and the Cybermen attack. But pretty much any one of the Z fighters at this point can take down the Cybermen, and they wouldn't have much trouble at all. Even Yajirobe and Chaozu well, maybe not so much Chaozu, but Yajirobe, because the Cybermen are as strong as Chaozu, but you know, with his psychic abilities, I mean, hell, him and Yajirobe can do like a little team up if they wanted to, and just take down multiple. But Yajirobe by himself, keep in mind, Yajirobe's power level here is pretty much around the same power level that Krillin was in canon, and Krillin basically took out all of the Cybermen, and we know for a fact that in Dragon Ball, even if your power gap is not that significant, you can still, because the way Akira put it, as long as you have something like a 2 times increase, but even if it's a little bit less than that, but yeah, if you have like a 2 times increase, you know, something that's very nebulous, very marginal, you can still overwhelm pretty much any opponent, even if there's multiple of them. So it wouldn't necessarily matter because you'll just be that much stronger and faster. So they could do that, but most likely I would just give it to Yamcha, because I think he would still step up first here. And pretty much with his higher power level here, even if the Cybermen did try to explode, I think that Yamcha can break out and ultimately deal with him. And I would just say that pretty much everyone just cleans up from there. It would be absolutely no challenge, but that's pretty much going to be the easiest it gets for them, because then we have Nappa stepping into the ring, and oh boy. So with that increase in his power level of 10,000, now see, even originally, Piccolo was actually close enough to his power level at around 3,500, pretty much the same power level that Tien is right now, and he still was kind of getting dog walked. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, what happens here is an utter catastrophe. It's an absolute slaughter, especially because Nappa's now at a power level of 10,000. The Z Fighters know that they are completely out of their depth. They don't really stand a chance, even they all team up, but they do the best that they can, but casualties do ensue because of Nappa being so much stronger and faster this time around, and the fact that because him and Vegeta are more so in a rush, and also they prepared for, again, the Super Saiyan. They didn't prepare for any of these guys because, you know, they just assumed they'd automatically be stronger, and now they are just significantly stronger. So Nappa kind of like just does away, not really taking any more time than he needs to, and essentially we start having drop-offs. So Yajirobe dies. He essentially gets putt-kitted so hard that he kind of explodes. Like, Nappa literally just shoves his foot right through this guy's gut, like just caves in Yajirobe's chest. He's dead, dusted. Chaozu does try to hold him with, you know, like psychic barriers and things of that nature, tried to hold him down, but it doesn't matter because Nappa just overpowers that. And then when Tien tries to jump in to help out Chaozu, he ends up getting his arm cut off. Chaozu, of course, still tries to go for the self-destruct, but it doesn't work. Tien, who wasn't even close in canon, is still not close here, and he's actually even further away here, and ultimately ends up just being murdered. This leaves us down to our last 2 fighters, pretty much, Krillin and Yamcha. Now, of course, Goku and Piccolo are already aware, and before Nappa can deliver a finishing blow over to Yamcha after he kind of like just beats them up a little bit, before he can deliver a finishing blow, he's instantly punched in the face by none other than Piccolo and Goku, both arriving there instantly via instant transmission. And so they don't actually have time to pick up any senzu beans because they did just arrive there instantly. So like they came immediately from King Kai's all the way to being here. So Yamcha and Krillin are still kind of like on the brink, but that's going to be fine for right now because now it's going to be Nappa and Vegeta versus Goku and Piccolo. And pretty much the battle lines get drawn and immediately start. Wasting no time at all, both Goku and Piccolo power up to their maximums within base and immediately go charging. You have Piccolo versus Nappa, and then you also have Goku versus Vegeta. And since it's so much closer here, with actually Piccolo being the stronger of between him and Nappa, and Goku only being not that much weaker than Vegeta, but pretty much around the kind of like not as significant as it was in canon, but pretty much around that same gap of power. It actually goes, you know, a lot better. They essentially are trading blows back and forth, both groups, but Piccolo quickly gains the upper hand over Nappa, essentially using a few techniques in his arsenal that he usually doesn't use, such as the giantification that he actually budges out. They kind of stomps Nappa into the ground with, kicking him across the field. Nappa does get angry and over his volcanic explosion, but it ultimately doesn't work on Piccolo as he manages to teleport out of the range and come back into view, slamming right into Nappa's back. Before Nappa can go flying farther away, Piccolo stretches his arm and begins to choke out Nappa with the intent of trying to strangle him to death. Meanwhile, with Goku and Vegeta, their battle was far more intense, pretty much still going similar to how it does in canon, just like I said, with a far more intensity. as Vegeta, like I said, did indeed prepare for fighting the Super Saiyan. So he actually is kind of mocking Goku somewhat, because although he is surprised at the large level of power, he was glad that he was right in order to prepare. So like I said, he ends up ultimately mocking him and saying that it doesn't even matter if he is a so-called fabled Super Saiyan, because it's seemingly enough as though Vegeta has finally gained the upper hand, and that he's even stronger than a supposed Saiyan of legend. Begins to pummel Goku and knocking him back. Goku is still somewhat keeping into the fight, but it is quickly being shown that the tide is turning against him. In the midst of their fight, sees what is happening to Nappa and decides to help him out, shooting a flaming ki blast at Piccolo, which ultimately ends up getting him off of Nappa, allowing Nappa to now gain the upper hand as he begins to pummel down onto Piccolo. But Goku, wanting to jump into the fight immediately and stop Vegeta from doing anything else, he immediately gets back into it. However, nothing really changed in between the last exchange that they had, Vegeta basically noting that it doesn't matter once again, even if Goku is a so-called Super Saiyan, that he mocks his power because he is a Saiyan elite. He is the ultimate Saiyan. And that a battle with him was a battle to the death, a battle so intense that no one could prepare for it. Goku basically retorting that even a reject can surpass an elite if he trained hard enough, and that he was going to quote-unquote show him exactly what his power could really do. Goku begins to charge his ki, and as the sky darkens and thunder starts to rain, Goku's muscles start to bulge as his ki becomes more violent. His eyes turn a bright shade of yellow before his hair spikes up. The increase this time around being more than enough to shatter the scouters of both Vegeta and Nappa. And although Vegeta could not sense energy, he could definitely feel the pressure and knew that he was in immediate danger, but his body had been completely paralyzed, not realizing that this was none other than the emotion of fear. It had suddenly overtaken him, but within the blink of an eye, before he could even react, Goku was slamming a hard fist right into his face, pretty much almost knocking Vegeta's jaw off. But Goku wasn't finished yet, and with the intense rage of seeing his friends' dead bodies fueling him, he immediately began to beat down on Vegeta, hitting him with combo after combo. Punches, kicks, knees, grapples, anything inside of Goku's arsenal that he could use. In regards to his martial prowess, he was using to their fullest extent, to lay an absolute beatdown onto Vegeta. Nappa was completely dumbfounded. He couldn't even believe that somebody could be this strong. But then he starts to hear a chuckle, a laughter from behind, as Piccolo regains himself after having been knocked down by Nappa. Nappa could have sworn that he was dead from that last attack. How was he able to stand up after that? But Piccolo says you shouldn't underestimate the people of Earth. Looking over to Goku, he basically smiles and says that now it's time for him to get serious as well, which began to force Nappa to stumble back as he was questioning the very reality of the situation. There was no way Piccolo was holding back. He couldn't possibly believe it and told him to stop bluffing. Piccolo then smirks maliciously and states firmly to Nappa that he wasn't bluffing, that he'll show him the true power of the Demon King Piccolo, shouting out Kaioken before being encompassed by a fiery red aura, instantly charging at Nappa and vanishing from his sight. Nappa can only feel searing pain as he looked down towards himself after Piccolo had vanished in order to see Piccolo had reappeared with a gut punch directly into Nappa, one so hard that it ended up cracking his armor. Nappa then stumbled back and completed another shock, coughing up blood as he fell to one knee, basically screaming out that this was impossible. And he was cursing him, saying, "Damn you, you Namekian slug." The comment of a Namekian actually did take Piccolo back for a second, but he paid it no real mind, just uttering to Nappa that this was the end for him, before preparing to charge at him for another attack. And that was the end right there. Woo! I know you guys are probably going to be extremely like, what the F? I can't believe you just left us on that cliffhanger just when is about to hit the fan and get. Well, no, shit has already hit the fan. Excuse me for that one. But right when we were about to reach the penultimate climax, and look, I hate to hype my own self up like that, but I can't sit here and lie to you guys when I say that, yeah, this was really cool for a lot of those quote unquote Piccolo fans out there, especially to kind of like see him get to be in the action like this and really put in work. And so I like this dynamic. Okay, I like the idea of having them just rush into it, and then because pretty much not really so much Piccolo's friends, but by this point he has already changed his characters. Why I didn't mention it, because he's already changed his ways, he's already changed his character, so he is somewhat friendly with these people, but it's not really his friends, it's more so Goku. But to see the fact that they immediately rushed in, which Piccolo would do either way, right? He's not going to just stand around kind of like talk, or even though he is someone who likes fighting, he's not someone who wouldn't get the job done when the time called for it. So seeing that Goku immediately rushed in, and him and Goku really, but immediately Goku rushed in and Piccolo is rushing in too, and they just immediately started going for it. And then, powering up the way that they did to kind of like really showcase the fruits of their training. Of course, it's epic. We're not done yet. They still got more power up to come. And because right now, I will let you guys know that Goku's not even using the fullness of his Ikari form. Right now, he's only using a times 5%. And again, with him having so much control and learning how to use it from King Kai's teachings with the Kaioken, essentially Goku can indeed do this. Like, he has levels that he can use towards it, just like you would with the Kaioken. And so essentially he's only using a times 5. Pretty much times 10 immediately would be overkill. So I'm trying to not immediately get rid of Vegeta and them like that, because just one hit alone, even with a times 5, just one hit alone, like I said in the story, pretty much Vegeta almost got his head taken off. Because keep in mind, this would put Goku at a power level over 100,000. Okay, and so Vegeta at this point is just nowhere near that. He would literally need the Ozaru himself. And don't get me wrong, we're gonna point that out next time in regards to Vegeta figuring out what this form is. But still, nonetheless, that's pretty much the end right there, guys. Like I said, because yeah, this is epic, and I can't wait for you guys to see the next part. It is going to continue the epicness of this fight. And there are going to be more surprises in store, so I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day. Peace. And to all my Gummy Knights, new and old, just remember, this is a man's world, but it would be nothing without his brain and his bronze. And lying is indeed the most fun that a woman can have without taking off her clothes. Good night.